Tuesday, March 7th, to hear the presentation by the Board of Education on their proposed budget. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. For members of the public, I'm sorry that this is a little delayed. We had a technology glitch, but we are up and running, and we welcome Superintendent of Schools, Matthew Curtis, who's going to be doing the presentation tonight. And Matt, if you could please introduce members of your board and staff who are with you.
Sure. I have Assistant Superintendent Neil Sullivan, Assistant Superintendent of Teaching and Learning Sue Lemke. Jason Casey is in charge of our capital and network infrastructure. Tara Willer, board member. Susan Selena, board member. Brian Watson, board member. And Amy Merriweather, finance director. Up here?
Yes.
Oh, okay. That is the team.
All right. Well, why don't you get us started?
Okay. It's good to see everybody, and I appreciate having an opportunity to come out and give what's a pretty brief overview. I tried to keep this presentation, you've seen some of it before, consistent with what we saw in our three-board meeting, which I thought was a really good conversation, and we moved the timing of that meeting to work with some more accurate fixed cost info. So I've changed a little bit of the themes and priorities, but they pretty much remain the same for our budget development. Contractual obligations, market-driven increases in operational costs. We have an increase in enrollment that I'll demonstrate with a graphic that we need to respond to with some staffing requests. A deficit carried from last year in special education outplacement costs and transportation, which I know we talked about in a couple months ago, facilities maintenance needs, and then how we try to offset that a little bit using our non-lapsing funding. And my board, which I'll talk about as I get further into this, when we did our workshop, my budget number at the workshop, I know Lisa and Bert, you were there, was 9.3, I believe it was. And my board, at the direction of our board, to go back and look at our new staffing requests and make sure any new staffing is offset in your budget presentation. So we've used that as a theme and a priority as we planned with our Board of Education. So there is the overall budget number, $82,386,678, an increase of $5.2 million or 6.95% over last year's operating cost. So three quick parts to the presentation tonight, just some contextual information, some celebration, some discussion of return on investment, and then a look at a snapshot of the main drivers that get to that 6.95. All right, so this is a slide that Amy and I worked on together to kind of demonstrate what our strategy was as we moved from feedback we got in our presentation at the tri-board, feedback we got at our presentation at the budget workshop to our board. So we tried to create this number that we present to you tonight that our Board of Ed approved at 6.95, close to that fixed cost analysis number that we presented to you at the tri-board. So this budget really represents what I had talked about in those priorities, the market-driven increases, enrollment staffing shifts, and then deficits that we've had the last couple years in that area of special education. We do not have the proposal which we had in my budget workshop, which was really trying to expand that CNR line item. So our hope initially in developing this budget was to take that, I believe it's a $580,000, $590,000 CNR line item. We also purchased our buses out of that line item, pull the bus dollars out, which was about $300,000, so we could commit to that $590 to take care of our building needs. As we had to reduce this number, we went away from that proposal. So this budget of 6.95 includes that standard dollar figure that we've had in CNR, and we need to figure out as we move forward whether we buy a bus or we don't buy a bus. Those are decisions we need to make, but that allowed us to take $300,000 out from that initial presentation in our workshop. 935 was the dollar figure that I presented to our board initially in the workshop, and we went through. We reduced that at the direction of our board by $1.8 million to get to the 6.95 that they approved and that I present to you this evening. Little background information, we show this and share this with the Board of Finance and our Board of Education on an annual basis. This is our per pupil expenditure. It's a good comparative across districts to look at it because it's an audited number that the state of Connecticut pulls from our annual report that we dump our data in there. And you can see where we are with comparative peer communities, all in the similar ballpark listed there on the left-hand side, and also a little historical budget information for us of our 10-year average budget increase and our 5-year average. So certainly this 6.95 we come to you this year is an outlier in terms of the macro number that we've seen before, but a reminder and put the data out there that our Board of Education has been responsible in our collaboration with the Board of Finance over many years in trying to get to the target goals that we've set.
DRG, Matt, I'm sorry, that acronym.
It's a district reference group, so they pool different communities together that have similar kind of demographics in various areas, wealth indexes, enrollment looks, things like that, and you kind of get a comparative group of about 18 to 19 districts.
And that's rank and cost?
That's what that is right there, yeah. Enrollment projections, we shared this data before. It's the same exact slide. We've talked about our ability over time to offset some of our increases by capturing teacher classroom positions. It's much more difficult to do that now when our enrollment decline has shifted towards an incline, particularly at the elementary level over the past couple of years, which is where we've added staffing. And you can see a projected increase of 145 students. Much of that looking at a kindergarten projection that's pretty significant. We're going to have to see how that shakes out over time. That's always the trickiest grade level to predict. But an enrollment trend that is certainly reversed in our community. As you can see over the next several years, we're projected to increase by over 100 students. So there are both space implications there, certainly cost implications due to staffing, and something in this budget we felt we needed to address with a few new classroom positions. Again, not a new chart and trying to keep this consistent in terms of what our themes were. This is a graph that represents the number of students that are currently receiving their education in specialized schools outside of Simsbury, special education students. And you can see a pretty significant increase over time. And this is an area that has really driven cost for us. And I think it's twofold. We have increased numbers, increased need, and we have a market, privatized market on the outside, whose costs have increased as well. So we're kind of getting, it's a little bit similar to that construction conversation that we had earlier in the year, that market conditions have changed, and we've been forced to respond to them. So this is an area where we had a deficit last year that we discussed. It was about $500,000. We carried that deficit forward to this year, and it's a pretty significant area we feel we need to address moving forward so that we're not consistently in this deficit position and pulling from other parts of our operation to cover what can be a pretty volatile line item for us.
Matt, where are you with that in this year's budget?
In terms of overall projected deficit, about $700,000, with a plan to close it, but that's where we are at this point.
Close it within the current appropriation?
That's what we're hoping to do, yeah.
Just in terms of like normal year over normal year,
Yeah.
2018, 2019, and your projection is a 67% increase.
Yeah.
And 2021 makes sense, COVID year, then a spring back, and
Right.
now it's even higher
Yeah.
by 10%. So,
Which that last one's,
any
it
thoughts
is a
there?
projected, the last one. We're at a similar level to the green right now, but
okay. But just a huge jump since 2018.
yeah, two areas, mental health and significant behavior, with almost kind of polar opposite challenges that we're seeing in the school district, or two that we have been forced to respond to differently. And there's, I think, different ways we need to think about that strategically over time.
Do you know how that compares to other schools in our dirt?
It varies based on what the districts have for specialized programs internally. So that would be the other way to strategically get at this, Derek, is you look at, all right, do we have an effective program for significant behavior kids at our elementary levels? Like right now, we don't. Some districts do. Glastonbury does have one. So I think in the macro numbers, they would look different. Those programs have been successful in certain districts because they take tuition students. So like we may send a tuition student to Glastonbury, and the program is kind of self-funding that way. It's similar to what we do with our Farmington Valley Transition Academy, which is our 18 to 22-year-old students once they leave our district that we still have an educational responsibility for. It's a collaborative with Farmington. We take tuition students in and we offset. So I think there's different ways to problem solve this, but they unfortunately all cost startup money and don't help us today as we sit here.
Yeah, it'd be great to be able to see a cross-section of the programs that we offer versus other schools in our DIRG, and having consistency there might level out costs and actually, I would just say share, you know, you talk about regional, that might be one way.
Yep, absolutely. So just in terms of I have two slides here, talk about return on investment and just some celebrations. You know, one of the core goals of our Board of Ed, we have 4 goals in our strategic plan, but one is centered around student growth and success. And this is just a slide to demonstrate that why we talk a lot about challenges and problem solving when we get to budgets and we understand how complicated things are right now. Our students are doing really well by the measures that are put out there across the state of Connecticut, and I think it's important to note that as well. Underneath the picture, that's some of our high school data. So if you go from left to right, the top of the line there, the 87.9%, are our science standardized test scores, which were actually the highest in the entire state, which was a pretty cool accomplishment for our kids.
Entire state?
The entire state, yeah. Which is really neat to see, and something certainly worth celebrating. And you can see our SAT scores. So the next columns are our SAT scores across math and across English language arts, and you can see by comparative measures with like districts that we do well there as well. You shift over to the other chart, and that is like the mega roll-up of all the data points into kind of one metric to look at, which is it's our ESPA standardized testing score for both English language arts in grades 3 through 6, kind of rolled up in terms of the percentage of students that meet the achievement benchmark. And you can see we do pretty well there as well. I mean, room for improvement, obviously, in all these areas. But certainly in terms of our focus on teaching and learning, which is our core mission, I feel like we're pretty well aligned to ensure that our students are successful when they move on from our school system.
Who's Region 5, Matt?
That is, yes,
Reading.
That came up the other day. That's why I clapped my hands. There's so many different regions. Yeah, that's Joe Barlow High School. Yeah. Just in terms of a few visuals that I shared with our board that, you know, we're excited about some of the programs and offerings coming out of COVID and bringing our students back together and really being able to provide. The upper left is an example of a new program that we kicked off this year. It was actually a STEM night. It was led by Maggie Seidel. We had 60 student presenters, 25 elementary students that aided in the presentations, and we had 400 students that came to kind of look at other presentations that kids put together. And it was really a dynamic evening around science, technology, engineering, and math, and just showed the engagement level and talk about how our curriculum aligns with the things that we're really proud of. So we had not had an opportunity to do things like this in the past couple of years, and it really is exciting to normalize and start to pull people back together to collaborate. Down below that picture is just a representation of our athletic program. We do have one of the most comprehensive athletic programs in all of New England with 38 offerings. So that's something to celebrate. We try to say that we're unique in terms of what we provide our students, both in terms of their elective offerings academically, but the offerings in terms of extracurricular as well. Had to do a plug for Matilda in the upper right. Had an opportunity to go to the last show, a complete sellout. We completely sold out 6 of those shows. It was a wonderful performance by our students and a demonstration that the work we do benefits the community as well in terms of how many community members that don't have kids in the system came to watch that show, and just what talent by our students. It was really, really fun to watch. And then the last picture is just one of our art shows. We get ready in the spring to kick that off, and it's kind of that live presentation, kind of a capstone feel of our students' art portfolios and sharing their great work as people can come through and view things. So a robust curriculum offer, a robust program that we're certainly proud of here in the Simsbury Public Schools. So now to the numbers. All right, so this is, I have it separated, same way we talked about before, tried to put this in buckets, because I think as we go through, the challenge has become the buckets seem reasonable and you get to the total number, and we recognize that this total number poses challenges in the context of where we are. But when you look at our different contracts, and you obviously the teacher's contract is the largest contract, the first year of a 3-year settlement this fall. It represents a $2.5 million increase to the overall operation of a little over 3%. Certainly the other contracts and areas aren't of that magnitude just because of the scope of how we're built. But all in all, you can see we start with almost 4% in fixed costs when we're just talking about our salary obligations with our current staffing levels. Enrollment, we talked about the increase in enrollment. And as we work through our budget process with our principals and our program directors, and then our Board of Education, we feel that there is really a definitive need for 4 new certified staffing positions. 2 of those would be regular ed elementary classroom positions to respond to the enrollment projection. 2 of those would be special education elementary teaching positions to respond to what has been increased caseload. So that's like the number one priority of what our staff has talked about. Your question, Bert?
The percentages on the right in the last 2 slides, is that a percentage of the budget or the percentage increase?
That's a percentage to the overall operating budget.
Yeah.
Yep.
So what was the teachers on the previous side, just building on Bert's point?
Yeah, could we go back?
Yep.
That 3.26, what was an increase?
It's in the budget book, I believe. I'm going to go from memory. I believe it's a little bit over 7. And what that represents on the line item is not only the teacher contract increase, it includes the position, several of the positions last year that were grant funded. Cliff is created. I mean, we have an offset in the budget, but it includes those. And then it also includes, it's kind of like the cumulative effect, 3 unbudgeted elementary classroom positions we added due to enrollment.
And the arbitrated settlement for teachers was what percent?
It is 11.98 over 3 years, so about 4% year over year.
Matt, how does that compare with other settlements you were seeing across the state?
Very consistent. I mean, it's all comparative data. It was a shade under what the average was at the time, but certainly larger than what we've seen in recent negotiations. Go to the market-driven one. Yeah. So, our look at these challenging areas, certainly due to inflation, is how we try to kind of game plan and focus on cost escalation here. In our mind, it was almost a flat-funded budget areas, but had to respond to inflationary costs, and that's what these various increases represented. These were the areas that were the biggest driving factor in our budget. Transportation and utilities being the 2 largest, but another 0.63 to the overall operating cost, almost $500,000.
Matt, a quick question on electricity. I saw, and maybe it's for Jason, that you used a 396 as represented by the town's energy advisor for electricity. Is that because we have a great contract? Because everyone else is saying.
2 or 3 year contract.
So, good job.
Caught a break there. I skipped that one. So these were the main areas of challenge that we've been grappling with just in current year budget, and even last year. I talked about the $500,000 increase. That's to handle the shortfall in the outplacement and transportation. While, I know, Lisa, we had some offline conversations about there is certainly legislation in play right now that has quite a bit of momentum to address school funding overall. We're scheduled to see a slight increase in reimbursement on excess cost. but it's just an area that's so volatile. As we look at places where we can maybe potentially make adjustments, I don't feel comfortable that this is one of them. Due to you could have one or two students that could really drive this number in a way that you can't recover from, and you're right back in that same situation.
Matt, what is the current legislation between reimbursement rates, excess costs for last year and the coming year? Is it about 2% change, or?
I think a little bit higher than that, Lisa, on what we budgeted last year and what could come into play this year.
In terms of dollar numbers, is it a significant dollar amount or no?
It could be 200,000 to 300,000.
So, but as you said, an outplacement could be 150.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Right.
Okay.
Right. You know, on this particular line item, for me, it'd almost be see where that legislation settles and then come back and have a different conversation about it, rather than trying to pigeonhole it right now and see where that sits. You know, we hope that we don't have the situation we had last year when we had a lot of that outplacement occur in the spring. So that's why the projection number looks like it does, but we're hoping we can, you know, hold on some of those dollars as we move throughout. But it's certainly been a challenge for us. The two areas where we feel we can offset the costs that we've just gone through are the non-lapsing phase-in that Amy, we actually presented this as part of the budget last year with the grant-funded positions. We currently have $651,000 in the non-lapsing account. We would utilize $353 to kind of pay down some of the cliff that was created from last year. The other piece that would come off the top of this presentation at the direction of my board is we need to find a way to reallocate some of your current staffing, whether it's vacancies, it's reductions at Simsbury High School due to enrollment, it's capturing future retirements and having those conversations. Some non-certified staffing as you add certified staffing, but we've committed to offsetting the $475,000 kind of in new staffing, and it actually is the number that it took to get us under 7 with reductions. So we've talked about that. We haven't publicly said what those are yet. We have that, but we're waiting for the right opportunity in the process to be able to have a little more detailed conversation there. Health insurance, I know Amy presented at the tri-board, has certainly been a challenge. This insurance number is a better number than when we met. When did we meet, in January? In January, I think to the good 600,000 to 700,000 than what we saw as we got a little more favorable information. So we were able to, you know, lower that number a little bit off of the initial fixed cost look that we took, that we had when we presented to the finance board back in January. So then you kind of roll up all those buckets that we kind of analyzed in isolation, and we pull them back out to show how we build towards the 695. You can see the contractual drive and the insurance bucket being the two largest, and the other areas that we talked through being secondary to that, and then the offset of close to 800,000 in those two areas that I just spoke of. Gets a whole lot of detail down into 5 or 6 line items to a 6.95% increase. And that is the number that the Board of Education approved at our last meeting. And that's the number we brought forward to discussion tonight.
And they brought you down, what, 1.8 million?
From the workshop, correct.
Workshop, yeah.
So the workshop went up above fixed costs, and then they brought it down to, you're about 135 above the fixed cost, but the fixed cost went down. So net about
Right.
800 and 900, right?
Depending on how you look at it. Yep.
Right. Open it up to questions for the board.
Just walk me through what you just said again, just so I'm understanding your 800 comment.
Oh, so at the tri-board, we were
Right.
looking at fixed costs for healthcare that we thought was going to be about 600 or 700 higher than it was. So that fixed cost came down.
Right. Right. What we didn't share at, you're absolutely right. What we didn't share at that meeting was any of the real hard deficit information in special. I mean, I showed the data, but we didn't have
Oh,
that.
we knew,
We didn't have that in the
special ed, right.
fixed.
That wasn't in the fixed cost.
It's not really a fixed cost, I guess, when you look at it.
But
that
it's
way.
illegal, but it's actually a
It
mandate
is.
from the state.
Yeah.
So it's, in some ways, it is a fixed
Right.
cost. That's right. And on to other questions?
Not for me.
I'm trying to articulate the reasons why. We went through all those categories and I explained them all.
Yeah,
And I'm trying to put it into layman's terms for the citizen. Why did it go up 7% this year? I mean,
yeah.
how?
I'll give it another shot.
No, you did
Yeah.
a good job.
Oh.
I'm trying to, I see each item we went through and you explained why. You know, and usually it hasn't been this high, so why is it this high this year? In just plain terms.
I think two things outside of the specifics I talked about. The teacher's contract is a significantly higher settlement in and of itself than it has been in recent cycles, and that's market driven. I mean, a lot of our prior teacher contracts would be more of 10%, 8 to 9% over 3 years rather than 12%. So that is, by such an order of magnitude, your largest driver in the budget. Of the 82 million, that line item is 39 million. So you're taking your largest driver just with that alone and escalating it. Compounded a little bit by the fact that last year we had an enrollment drive late in the summer and had to respond with 3 teaching positions that were unbudgeted for. We roll those in. So that's $300,000 on top of that. And then as we all try to collectively, like we do on an annual basis, mitigate that tax increase and pass the budgets through last year, we utilized quite a bit of this ARPA funding across just about every avenue we could, and talked about the fact it would create cliffs and we'd have to have a plan to pay down the cliff, but you have cliff dollars in there as well. So it's not just the straight up teacher contract.
Matt,
There's other variables in it.
Whose offer prevailed this year, the towns or the unions?
We had a mediated settlement, not an arbitration.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we had a mediated settlement by
Between the
about
two.
late October.
Between the two.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I interrupted. You said one was the teacher increase.
Well, the rest was, do you want me to go through the other ones?
No,
or-
no,
Oh,
that's-
yeah, it was the other factors I had just
That's the
talked
main
about.
driver,
Yes,
okay.
yeah,
And it's the teacher's contract and then the benefits you have in a separate line item, right?
correct, the
Health
insurance line item. Yeah.
So the two of them together,
Almost 80% of the budget.
yeah. So for members of the public, when the Board of Finance gets a budget, we have a legal obligation to fund what has been legally committed to by the Board of Education, the Board of Selectmen. So we start the budget with a legal obligation, not is this a good idea or a bad idea, but here's the legal commitment. We have to make it balanced. So we need to make sure there's enough revenue to pay for what the commitments are. So that it's not entirely a whole look at a new budget, just for members of the public. Mike, did you have any questions?
I do. It's a bit of a newbie question. Can you explain the relationship between Simsbury Public Schools and Salters Express? We own the buses. They're like, how does all that work?
So, yeah, there's a contract for transportation services. Salters has had that contract for a long time, but it was renewed, help me here.
Within the last 2 years.
Last 2 years, yep. So, over time, the school system's normal everyday bus routes requires 29 buses. Used to be a little over 30, we brought it down a little bit. So the school system owns those 29 buses. That's what, and then a lift van for some special education students. So those vehicles are part of our property. They maintain them as part of the contract. And Salters has some of its own buses that it owns, in addition to our fleet. Some of those buses are our old buses that they buy from us, and have as spares and extracurricular trips and other things we use buses for. So the contract itself, in addition to the buses, there's also a large number of van runs that need to happen as well. And we own just some of the vans. JR owns I should say that. Salters Express owns the majority of the vans that you see around town. So that's how I can explain it in the simplest terms, but if you have deeper questions about it, I can.
Just,
And one of the,
it's just an interesting relationship, right?
Right.
Where we own some equipment and they own some equipment, and obviously they supply the drivers.
right. So
We have insurance responsibilities and they have insurance responsibilities, and
yeah. One of the challenges in terms of transportation as a cost center is when we went through COVID, you had a major, I don't even call it turnover, kind of walk away of a percentage or a shortage of those willing to drive buses that we have not recovered from. So you took what was a much more stable situation overall, particularly on these van runs, which are our specialized transportation runs to these outside schools. The cost to go to a third party on those van runs, if Salters Express can't handle them compared to if they can, is significantly different. That's an area we need to continue to focus on to figure out how to innovate and get better as JR tries to grow his driver workforce again to meet the needs. And that's kind of where our focus lies as we look at that over time, because it's a real challenge. It's a real challenge. It's a challenge with athletic transportation. It's a challenge with special education transportation.
and there are multiple industries struggling to get drivers.
Correct.
To go back to Lisa's last comment in terms of our obligation to fund fixed costs, it's basically in line with hiring and not hiring, right? I mean, your fixed costs increase with every FTE that you hire, and that's ongoing because it's contractual. Likewise, if there's a reduction, it reduces your fixed costs as well.
Correct.
Are there any other questions? Matt, a couple of just quick follow-ups, and this is maybe goes to Jason. Can you please get us a prioritized list of your CNR projects? There is a third source of funding that is relatively new, 5 years. It's called the CNR, or Capital Reserve Fund. It has about $2 million in it. We have typically funded town projects, but it was always designed for town and school projects, and the Board of Selectmen has prioritized their capital there, but we have not seen projects from you. So keep the buses in your budget because that's a recurring expenditure, and so it should be in your budget. But for one-offs, it would be helpful to know what you need, and then we can prioritize those against what the town is looking to do too. Thank you. One of the things I did want to make the Board of Education aware of, and Amy can help me out on this, the Henry James project, Renovate is New, does have about $2 million in savings that we cannot yet tap because we're waiting on the state audit. So be reaching out to you, but that is a nice sum that could be used, for example, for the Henry James roof that is scheduled on the CIP next year. So to the extent there are things we can do to try and get that audit done, that would free up that money as a source of funding. And I want to thank Amy. We asked her to investigate that, and she was able to get us some hard numbers on that. All right, are we ready for the numbers? Amy, can you? Oh,
Do you want to do the couple capital projects we have now as
yes.
well, or?
Definitely.
Okay, so I'll just
I got ahead
shift
of
with
myself.
Jason real quick, and then we'll go from there.
So this will be brief. There's only 2 items on our agenda. So we're looking for an additional appropriation for the TerraFill modulars and then some security improvements. If I can see the next slide. In the previous fiscal year, we did ask for $350,000. Unfortunately, when the engineers were on site, there were some unforeseen challenges, mostly related to where the modulars are located on the property and where modulars can be on that property. There's really no other place to put them than where they are. However, since they've been installed, there's been additional things such as propane tanks and lines and additions to the building, making removal and reconstruction have to go through a more tedious process of either coming in with smaller pieces or large cranes going over the top of the building. Either way, it's an expensive proposition that we didn't fully see when we first made the original estimates. So we're asking for an additional $500,000 to complete this project. The next piece is a biennial security improvement. Every other year, we've been spending $250,000 on security improvements throughout the schools. It's been used for items such as films on glass, for vestibules. This year, we're looking to replace security cameras. So we have a large security camera infrastructure going back to 2008. Many of these cameras are getting old and failing. They're also not at the resolutions that we currently buy cameras at by a long stretch. The cameras we buy today, you can see much farther in all directions with much better resolution. So we're hoping to replace as many as we can, the significant areas, with this security fund. And those are my two items. So
What was the last biennial security budget line item? Remember? Is it consistently 250? It's been 250?
Yep.
And then it says district-wide, but presumably they wouldn't be in Henry James because of the renovations there, and you wouldn't put them in Latimer Lane when they're gonna be moving into a new school, right?
It wouldn't be Latimer Lane. It would be Henry James, as the renovation didn't touch the cameras. There are ones that date back to some of the earliest.
So the additions to Henry James do not have cameras on them?
Correct. Well, the auditorium, we added one that was not part of the, right, but there are, when they did the renovation in the different wings of the school, the second floor, the science rooms, those hallways have the original cameras.
And there were security upgrades made to the entrance of Henry James as
That's
well,
right.
right? So,
Vestibule.
yep.
Other questions on capital? Matt is ready to move on. Okay. Amy, if you could start with the full budget showing Board of Selectmen, debt service, the whole. Let's get a first look at where we are. You can make that a lot bigger for us. And Amy, could you please walk us through sort of what all this is and what it means, including the revenue side?
So we start over here at the adopted fiscal year 23 budget. We had a town operating budget of a little over $26 million. For fiscal year 24, the town manager proposed is a little over $27.5 million to get to our change of an increase of about $1 million or 3.96%. We had some ARPA funding that came in, and you'll see at the top here we're showing $3.7 million in the fiscal year 23 budget and the fiscal year 24 budget. The same exact number. We got two tranches, and then down here under revenues it comes out. So that is a net zero effect on the budget. If you go down to the education, we have about $77 million that was adopted for fiscal year 23 compared to Matthew's proposed budget of $82 million. An increase of about $5.3 million, or that 6.95% that he just presented. The cash for capital, last year we had a little over almost $1.3 million in additional cash that we were able to utilize for capital needs. We knew that this was going to be coming out for fiscal year 24 and therefore zeroed out. And then the last piece is our debt service, where it was approved at $6.3 million for fiscal year 23, and we're expecting about a $2 million increase for fiscal year 24 with various miscellaneous capital projects, including the first tranche of the Latimer Lane project. And then down here, over here, so we have our total expenditures last year of about just shy of $115 million, and then proposed for fiscal year 24 of $122 million. A $7.1 million increase, or 6.19%. We go down here and we have our non-tax revenue, which was about $13 million in fiscal year 23, a slight decrease for fiscal year 24 of $12.6 million, so a slight decrease of $376,000. Again, the ARPA money that offsets the expenditures up top. So your total revenues for non-tax is 16.7 million for fiscal year 23, and then almost 16.4 million for fiscal year 24. So if you take your total expenditures and you subtract out your non-tax revenues, this balance down here for fiscal year 23, the 98.1 million, is the amount that we need to collect from taxpayers in order to meet our budget needs. So the same thing for fiscal year 24. We take our total expenditures, 122 minus our 16 million, and then we have a taxpayer balance of 105 million, an increase of 7.4 million overall from the 2 years, or 7.63%.
Thank you. So there are a couple things going on there that I just want to bring to attention. So this doesn't show the grand list growth. So there you see the non-tax revenue is flat. Our grand list growth sort of netting out the revaluation sort of fluctuations is 2.3 million. So you'll see we have to raise 7 million expenditure growth and a net 2 million new revenue. So that's a deficit of 500. If you think about what happened last year, you look at that bottom amount to be raised by taxes is 7.4 million. Last year it was 2.94 million. So that's almost a $5 million difference between last year and this year for the amount to be raised, which is if you're just doing the math.
Increase in the amount to be raised.
You're increasing the amount to be raised by almost 5 million. So just doing simple math, there's going to be a tax increase. Because it's a reval year, it gets a little crazy, and we'll go through the charts, but for a median taxpayer with a $350,000 home who had a median increase in their home value of 27.7%, that's about a 5.95% tax increase, or about $560 a year. But that's not where it ends. We know that some people are going to see 21% of our population is going to see an increase in their taxes above 12%. Some of those are going to hit 16, and some of them are going to be higher than that for a tax increase, but some will be lower. We have about 9% of our population who will actually see a slight tax decrease, but 90% will see a tax increase, and we'll walk through the numbers. And I actually have a PowerPoint on that we can do later at the end if people are interested in sort of the analysis. But we're going to walk through the numbers and sort of show what that looks like at different price points and what the budget impact is. We're also looking, because we're the Board of Finance, we look not just at this year, but some of the out-year projections. And it's those projections that are a little stark, but we're going to make them a little better tonight, but it's still very stark. So Amy, if you take us to the budget modeling.
I have a question first. On the debt service, and I think I had asked, you have this, I think, Amy, but is it generally pro rata, 70-30, Edge Board of Ed to town, in terms of the, the $2 million or the $2 million? Is it?
So I don't know specific. The $2 million would likely be more towards the Board of Ed side, but you did ask me to put that together, and when I put it together, it was about 70% Board of Ed and 30% town.
Okay.
Total debt load, right, Amy? Okay. All right, let's go to the modeling. Why don't you walk us through what's in the model, and then we'll get down to the taxes.
Sure. So we have the comparison over the next few years. So we start again on this end with the town operating budget, the approved budget for fiscal year 23, the school approved budget for fiscal year 23, that cash for capital, and then your debt service to get your gross expenditures. And then our anticipated non-tax revenue to get to your your net expenditures, and this is the amount to be raised by taxpayers, so kind of the same format as the chart that you previously saw. And then in fiscal year 24, we have our proposed numbers with the town manager's budget and the superintendent's budget. The increase from fiscal year 24 compared to fiscal year 23, the dollar increase, and then the percentage increase. And then we estimate out for the next 4 years based on various assumptions as to what a budget could look like based on some inflationary impacts, some union negotiation impacts, revenue assumptions, things of that nature.
Amy, have you put in the Board of Ed 4% increase in salary in the year projections yet?
Yes.
Okay. All right, let's go down.
So then here you have what our anticipated grand list is going to be, which then calculates what our property taxes are. And then from here, we can take our grand list, which then calculates into our mill rate. Right now, instead of using 100% tax collection rate, we use an estimate of 98.5%. So at 98.5% collection rate, this is what our mill rate was for fiscal year 23. And then as of right now, what the proposed mill rate is for fiscal year 24, given the town manager's proposed budget and the superintendent's budget.
Amy, the 3102 is down from what is in the town manager's budget book. Can you speak to that?
So the town manager's budget book included the estimates for the grand list, and these are with the actuals input, so it decreased it slightly.
It was 31.05, so not a big change, but we'll take every bit.
And then if we scroll down, we just have various home impacts, so a $350,000 home, $450,000 home, $550,000, and then $750,000. So you have what your taxes were for fiscal year 23, and then with the reval, we did the 28% increase. So your $350,000 home is now about $448,000, and then these are your new taxes, so about $577 increase with the proposed budgets for a $350,000 house from the prior year.
We got slightly better numbers on the median. It's now 27.7, so that's why I get it down to 595, but you can see we're in the 6. But as you go down, you can start to see those numbers get bigger, 742, 907. And tell us what's going on in the 750 range.
So in the 750 range, the last time we had a revaluation, the lower valued homes saw a larger increase in taxes compared to the higher valued homes. And now with this reval, we're seeing the opposite. So the lower valued homes are seeing a slight a decrease, a neutral, or a 28% average increase, whereas the higher valued homes are seeing around 40, 50, 60% increase.
Now, a couple of things, because we're talking about the median, so some of those can go down. So Amy, can you change those to say 24%? Because some homes may see a 24%, although we don't think many. Okay, now go to 35. We know 1 out of 5 homes are going to see 35 or higher.
Replace the 24 or 35?
Pardon?
Replace the 24% with 35.
Yes, please. So those numbers, that's when things start to get breathtaking. So at 28, 27%, 500 a year, as those inch up, you can see the impact becomes starker for some. I do want to remind folks that about 9% of taxpayers in Simsbury will see a decrease, and that's because their home values did not increase anywhere near the 27%. If you increased 18% or lower, you're going to see a tax decrease. So that has both positives and negatives. It means your house didn't increase in value as others. So there's good news and bad news. So now as we go on to the next year, let's take a look at what happens. Why don't you talk us through that?
So this is anticipated for fiscal year 25. The $350,000 home, that is now $472,000 based on the 35% increase. This gives you your taxes of about $12,500, or an increase slightly under about $2,000.
Amy, you can reduce that first one to 31. I think we got that better number, right? And you can go back to the 27.7 on the other numbers. But you can start to see how those numbers get big. Now, one of the things we have in our modeling, because the Board of Finance only uses data that's given to us, and I think, Amy, you incorporated the CNR plan of the town manager in this, your modeling, correct, as delivered? Does that include the $2.5 million of her CNR plan that she had planned for using cash?
No.
You'd already taken that out? So my plan to make this better has just gone out the window then. So tell us what's driving this.
So it's various assumptions. We have on the expenditure side, like I said, we have some assumptions related to inflationary impact, about 1.5%, and then we have our salaries, negotiated salaries, about 3%. Down on the Board of Education side, we did, I think, an overall about a little over 4% increase. Our utilities are around 4%. But for fiscal year 24 specifically, if we look at our grand list projection, our fiscal year 25, so I'm sorry, our grand list projections from our assessor, she's showing a percent change of about a negative 8.75% as of right now. So that's the major reason for the increase in the taxes when we look at our levy for fiscal year 25.
And Amy, can you speak to why that would be?
Francine would have to speak to that. I don't know where or why she's coming up with specific values. I know I can speak to real estate as far as the reval for this year. We know that we could have court cases settling in the next year, so I know she took a conservative approach on that. And then on the motor vehicles, as we've seen the used vehicle values come up, they are anticipated to come back down. I'd have to get more detail on any of the economic development that she may have put in there. But I can tell you those are the two things that are conservative assumptions for the fiscal year 25 grand list.
Why would a reduction in the grand list result in an increase in taxes or the tax levy as opposed to simply an increase in the mill rate?
So it would result in an increase in the mill rate, which then increases your taxes.
Oh.
Another thing that's happening next year is right now the town gets reimbursed.
Budget, it should be net zero.
Yeah.
But, yeah, that's,
You guys want, you got it?
yeah.
Go ahead
I
and
got it.
ask, Bert, if you don't understand the
No,
public.
I do
doesn't.
understand it. But really, the driver of the tax increase is still the increase in spending rather than the reduction in the grand list.
Well, right. So essentially, we have an increase in spending every year, and our grand list is never typically enough to cover our increase in spending. But now, only is it not going to cover, it's going to decrease.
A fair point.
It's going to contract.
We've had 3 good years of grand list, right?
The other thing that's happening in 2025 is the motor vehicle reimbursement that we get from the state should disappear. It's a 1-year look back. So this year we're going to get some revenue because our mill rate was 38.63. Because our mill rate will now be 32. The following year we won't get that look back because we are within the cap. So that's, depending on how you think about it, we're budgeting about $1 million there. Is that right, Amy?
Say that again.
For the mill rate motor vehicle reimbursement this year, $1 million.
Right.
We did get 1.5 because the municipal revenue sharing, so we might get more than that, but we generally don't budget the municipal revenue sharing. So that's a loss of revenue right there. So now we are starting in the hole. And then I feel like there was, debt service. What happens debt service next year?
So debt service increases again about $1 million, mainly due to the second issuance for the Latimer Lane project.
And then you'll see the following year it goes up about 600, right? And then it's not till 2027 that we start getting some relief. So we're going to have a big bump in debt service. So one of the things we're going to be asking both boards to look at is how can we smooth that bump, get that bump down? And there are 2 ways to do that in the out years. You can look at your bonding for this year, next year, and is it the year after, Amy, or is it just the 2 years?
It's just the 2 years.
So you don't have a lot you can reduce this year because you only have 600 or whatever, $1 million in bonding. So there's not much you can do. But in the next year, we'll ask you to take a look. Can stuff be moved out? If not, we've asked Amy to look at some of our reserves. Can we use it to smooth the bumps? So we're going to go from here. It's going to go like this, and then it's come back to here. Do we have money in reserves that we can use to pay that bump period? So we'll be evaluating that. But you can see the numbers. When we look at this budget, this year is dramatic. It's some of the biggest increases we've seen in a very long time, but it's really next year that's keeping us up at night. So I think a lot of our thinking and decision-making is focused on the 2-year outlook. Amy, is there anything you can see in our projection? I mean, how much could that vary? So if Francine is way off on her projections, if we change that, it's only 4% down, what happens?
Went from about, what was it at, 15 down to 11.
So even in like a really good case scenario, we get to that, we're still looking at 1,300. Let's make it even better. We're way off and it's just flat. So even if it's just flat, you're looking at now 892, 1,100, 1,100, 1,300, 1,800. So our best case scenario is that. I think most years our average is 1% or just under 1% grand list growth. So grand list will help. It's not going to save us this year. So I guess we're thinking that way. Amy, is there anything else we're not considering or that could make this better?
I don't think so. I mean, other than the assumptions, I haven't looked at anything for 25 yet.
And how confident are you in the assumptions you've made?
I mean, the assumptions are reasonable, but we're also, looking at, in my assumptions, I'm increasing everything, say 1.5%. Some are going to come under, some are going to come over. We're looking at, say, a 7% inflationary budget this year. Is it going to be another 7% on top of that? I have no idea. It could go down, it could go up. So the assumptions are reasonable, but whether they come to fruition or not, I mean, it's gone either way depending on the budget year.
Okay. And going back, our budget increase is what percent?
7.1.
The overall?
Yeah.
7.63.
So there is a state cap out there, and we've asked Amy to consult with council. The state cap says you can't go above 2.5% of the prior year budget or the rate of inflation. But there are some exemptions, like for capital. So we are really close. If you put in the exemptions, I don't even know if we make the cap, but I've asked Amy to consult with council. The reason why that is super important is that we stay within the cap, is that half of our state revenue will disappear if we go violate the cap. So we're waiting on a legal opinion on that. Well, hopefully the exemptions get us there, because I think they do exclude debt, and I'm not sure what else is excluded. But that's something we'll be monitoring, and going forward, especially next year, we're really going to have to monitor that. So I'll open it up to comments from members of the board, and then if any Board of Ed members want to say anything.
I think it's probably worth noting that I think it was at one of the prior meetings where we said that, without the reval, the grand list only increased by what, 2.3%?
2.3 million.
Or 2.3 million, and we're seeing, a $7.5 million increase to our proposed budget for this year, and looks like next year $8 million on top of that. So. I think one way to avoid the cap is to bring in the budget as opposed to spending legal dollars on
there are two ways,
making
yes.
sure that we don't hit the cap.
Well, the good news, we pay them a lump sum, so we don't have to pay for the
They're
legal
on
opinion.
retainer.
We've already paid for that. But that's a good point to make. Art, did you have any comments?
You asked Amy, is there anything we're not thinking of we can't do? And she didn't have any rabbits to pull out of her hat. No, my concern is if you had a bad year, especially coming off years where we've had it under control, you have a high settlement of about 4%, and you've got right on the lane bonding kicking in. And I don't have an observation other than the obvious one that we're going to follow this with an equally bad year or an equally costly year. And so that's what I guess I'm sitting here and wondering, what is it possible to do about it? The numbers, we've been through them. It's the double whammy that just kind of takes the breath out. I don't have a solution for it, but I'm just you're asking me. Those are my thoughts in seeing the presentation.
What we don't have yet, and we're waiting on, are comparisons with other towns. Are other towns seeing this type of same either cost by town in education or overall amount to be raised by taxes? Because I think some towns are seeing a little bit of grand list, perhaps more. We did have the hit of healthcare. Hopefully next year that will not be there, so that will be at least a relief. Unfortunately, this is a perfect storm year. We do
enrollment a little bit as well. We're one of the few towns that's seen an increase in enrollment. South
Right.
Windsor, Simsbury, it's about it from the
Which is
analysis
which is a
I've
good,
looked at.
which is what we want, and yet,
Creates a challenge.
yeah.
So it's a quandary. I'll open it up. I know Matt has, and you all are looking for some guidance. Part of our guidance is this is tough, and there's not a lot. The tools in the toolbox to make it less tough are very limited. We have a little bit of ARPA that we can use to smooth some of the bump in debt service, but it's still not going to get us 100% where we need to go. What I know I'm looking for is to make sure we're not doing anything, and I doubt that we are, given the stuff I've seen from Matt's budget and my preliminary look at Maria's budget. We don't want to put something in that next year you have to remove. That would be a terrible thing. So I haven't seen that. But so where are people? I think Art said it best last time. Everything's reasonable, but the number is too high.
Yeah.
given where we are today, but more importantly, what we're looking at tomorrow. So I'll open it up to thoughts. Well, let me get the Board of Ed's input first, see if you have any questions or comments you want to make.
You know, I think I agree with you, it's a very challenging year. We've had historically low budgets this is the highest budget in my 16 years on the Board of Ed. Let me put it that way. I've never voted for a budget this high. It is a perfect storm. I understand your concern about next year. For me, I think a little bit about the fact that it is a presidential election year and magic things happen to the economy in presidential election years. So I'm hoping that maybe the inflation numbers come back and we get some relief because nobody wants to go into the polls in November running for president with horrible economic numbers. So I hope that mitigates some of next year's worry. But, you know, I feel like we've given you a very responsible budget, and I understand the numbers are hard. I live in, you know, one of your $350,000 homes, and I understand that there comes a time where you have to pay for the services you need. And it's not easy, but we all have our own budgets, and we all are trying to navigate those as well. I just feel like this is a responsible budget given everything we've come up against this year. I don't know if anybody else wants to comment.
I think you're right. I think the enrollment issue is definitely, it's something that was harder, that we weren't anticipating. And again, good problem, but still it needs to be, we want to make sure all of our students get what they need. And that gets to be expensive. This the out-of-town tuition is a very crazy number for us and very concerning, that I think we've been talking about, and how to fix it, how to try to do something different to save money there down the road. I think this is a responsible budget. I think it's looking out for the health, safety, and welfare of each of our children.
Anyone else from the Board of Ed?
Sure, I'll say something. Yeah, it was a head scratcher for me, certainly. But when you look at the 4% teacher increase and roughly 2% insurance increase, that's 6% right there. And so, I mean, that's kind of like where we were, what we were looking at. And I think, you know, like Sue said and like Kara said, 6.95, you factor in just those two increases alone is very responsible. And none of us were happy with the 9 point something percent we were staring at a month ago. So I think Matt and his team did a super job getting it down to this number. And as somebody who was part of that long process negotiating the teacher contract, we fought hard for that. We should be proud of the work that was put into that. And it was a long, long process, especially on the last night.
I think one thing I want to add about the teacher piece is we want to keep our teachers. We have excellent teachers, which shows in all of our numbers.
Right.
So we want to make sure that they stay here and that we work together with them. And that's why the negotiation, we're proud of the work that you guys did on that. But it's important to know that we want our teachers to stay, and it's not an easy world out there right now to find teachers.
Oh, certainly not.
I haven't heard from Sharon or Jeff. Do either of you want to speak?
I was just saying, no, everybody said it as well as I could. I mean, if you can consider a 6.95 a responsible budget, this is the year. The fixed costs are what they are, as you all saw. Anything above that is what, 20,000. I mean, it's very low past that fixed number. The teachers. The only thing I would say also about the teachers' contract is that was right in line, as has been said. It's very market driven. We are absolutely not an outlier. If anything, we're below the average. They just went up, and you have a lot of the finances, and a lot of little things, but they add up over time, right? A lot of just, for example, and as every state or every town did, got a lot of essentially free software and free services through COVID. Well, now we're getting charged with so inflation is hitting us, I think, a lot harder than we've been said here tonight. But so long-winded way to get to again. Are we happy about this? No, we're not happy about the number either. But it is what it is, and it is as responsible as we possibly can.
Sharon, did you want to add anything?
No, I think, like everyone has already said, and I think Matt's team has done a good job at trying to bring the number down. And so, unfortunately, it is.
I'll open it up to members of our board.
Just to note that one of the things that makes this difficult is that it has been a good product. I mean, the education system of this town has produced outstanding results. I mean, it's easier to get a little huffy and cut the damn taxes if you don't like. If we look at a crummy product, and Simsbury is known for outstanding education, and you delivered it again, so you make this much more difficult by the good performance.
We're not going to do like that. Yeah. Open it up to other members of the board.
Amy, could you bring up the debt chart?
I do.
Can you see that, please? I'm just calling it the debt chart. I'm not
The
calling
colored one?
it anything else.
That's a good transition.
That's right.
Well,
Yeah, one and the same.
yeah, so this is what has me concerned. That blue line kind of coming in over the 7, which is the target, and then creeping up to the 8 in some areas, unless I have those percentages wrong. Is the yellow the 8%?
That was the 8.
Yeah, and that's been a movement over the last couple of years to accommodate some large projects. I 100% acknowledge all the hard work that went into it and believe it's responsible. I think that the way I'm looking at it is not just this year, it's next year as well, and possibly into the next year after that. And that's what has me concerned, because we can all agree that this is a responsible budget, but in my mind, there needs to be pain all around in order to, kind of reduce some of these, reduce costs, but some of it that's out of our control, interest rates namely. And that's why we're seeing some of that bump up over. Personally, I'd like to get that, that 6.95, that 7 down to a low 6. Originally, I was in the mid 5s. So because of what's going to happen next year, and to at least take a little pain now, so it's not all on us next year and we're all staring at each other wondering how we got here. I'd like to see some additional cuts upwards to the tune of $750,000 to $800,000.
Comments from the other boards? Amy, what is a 595 budget increase? What number is that?
Hold on, let me look, I just closed it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's $800 million.
Us to reduce it 4%.
So every
Right.
$820,000 is 1%.
Of the entire budget or your budget?
Our
Their
budget.
budget.
Yeah, so where I'm talking,
Your
yeah,
estimate.
yeah.
So wait, you want the 7.6?
Well, what do we
Seven
get
to
to
go down to
750? What
595?
percent increase will 750 be, to Derek's point?
So if we reduced it 750, it would be 5.98.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
That's yeah, calc
Okay.
I did.
So that's a 5.9. Open it up to, we have the issue raised. Open it up to other members where people are comfort level in giving guidance and asking the Board of Ed to take another look.
I certainly, on the revenue side, I certainly share the sentiment. I have trouble seeing how you get there to be that aggressive. I mean, when you got huge chunks in there, like the teacher's salary and the debt, I don't know how you get that bold. I mean, I share the sentiment to want to get there, but if I had my red pen out, I don't know what I would circle to get that amount of cut out of it.
And unfortunately, we don't have the ability to red line or circle with the Board of Ed budget. But there were things in the presentation that I saw that might be able to get a good amount of the way there without detailing what those are.
Bert, did you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I don't have particular numbers in mind because I think all the numbers are scary. One of the things that disturbs me, especially under that chart, is that I attended the workshop, and at the very end, I heard some talk about what needs to be done with Squadron Line, and none of that is included in our long-term plans. So if this year and next year are going to be hard, and if we're going to make a proposal about Squadron Line in the near future, that just means these numbers carry out for several years going forward. So these are all things I think you need to keep in mind, is that we can't keep inflicting this level of pain on the town for several years running, and that means we need to find something close to the bone in the near term.
Mike?
I just look at those out years and think about a for sale sign going in front of my house, right? And who else is going to have that same exact thought? That's my immediate reaction. Now, I'm in the same column that Susan is in and go, okay, where's that going to come from, right? And that's our town folks. And that's my immediate reaction. And it has been multiple times when I start thinking about it. And I get the drivers, and I get that there are fixed costs there, that there's no negotiation. There's no red line for it. It just is cold, hard truth. But at the end of the day, we need to, that pain is going to be there for everybody, right? We're just going to have to be creative and find ways, right? Because I'm with Derek, right? We've got to find ways.
If I may, before you take or give comments, I look at the mill rate as kind of a marketing piece for the town as well. I mean, especially when you think about bringing your kids to school. I mean, sub 40 was always kind of my number. It got to be under 40 just to be competitive with a new family coming into town and only has young kids trying to work and save, and pay their mortgage. And I always thought that sub 40 was a target for us. And last year, I can't read that, Amy. What does that say? Is that 37.41? So we were, 38, 38 and a half. This year, wow, if we're going to bring people to town, let's do it this year with a 32. But just look how quickly that gets back up to 40.
Right.
In 2 years, we're back to a 40 mil with 28 to 30% increases in our property tax this year.
I think my concern, listening to all of you discuss this, is sort of your certainty that the grand list is going nowhere. And that, to me, is a bigger conversation about why we have no economic growth in this town. What is that situation, and what are we doing to mitigate that? Because that's concerning, that if we're going to be building budgets around negative growth, other than apartments that are draining our services time and time again, we have to find a better way forward.
That's a question for not us.
The town manager, yeah. What is sort of interesting, if you look at our comparison towns, we actually have one of the highest number of exempt properties. Farmington has more exempt properties than we do. We're at the second highest in our comparison group at about 12%. So some people are not, for legislative reasons, they've been granted exemptions, but we do have a higher amount of exempt properties. And when that happens, the rest of us pay more because that's how exemptions work. So that's one thing to think about. But you're right, without economic development, and the two go hand in hand because there's all this research that says as your mill rate goes up, economic development goes down, and you start entering this spiral. How do you get out of that? And that's a bigger question, to Derek's point, for the Board of Selectmen and the town manager on that point. But it is something that we're monitoring, which is why hopefully when Maria presents her budget, we'll have the comparisons to other towns. Some more budgets may have come in, and we'll see how we're doing in comparison, because it's not just how we do on our own, but to Mike's point, if Avon, with just as great schools, is not having the kind of budgetary or tax increases as Simsbury, people are going to start looking elsewhere, and businesses are going to start looking elsewhere. So that's sort of where we are. So we have a proposal from Derek around 450. I know my number, thinking about fixed costs on this, was somewhere between.
No, he
What?
said 800.
He said 800.
Oh, he said 800.
Oh, no, down to roughly 6%.
Oh, okay.
Instead of 6.95.
So I thought he said 750. Sorry, guys. So Derek said 8. I'm somewhere between 4 and 750. Just in terms of the numbers, trying to get us to where we need to be. I'm going to, we'll ask the Board of Selectmen to, in my head, I guess I was starting at about 6, similar with Derek, the 6%, Board of Selectmen at 2.5 to 2.75%. Just knowing what we have. We understand that you have legal obligations and things that you must do. So we do understand that there is a different standard of review of Board of Education budgets because you have a constitutional mandate to carry out the state's obligation to provide public education, and that requires us to fund what is necessary to do that. We have a reasonableness standard, and we do know, I know Bert and I were at the budget workshop. It was very, very informative and very well done, which is why I know I didn't have a lot of questions, because really every question I had was answered at that meeting. But so I would like to hear others where we do need to give them a number. They need to go back and do something. My suggestion would be that we.
Are we able to talk?
Sure.
My only thing for you to really understand is when we start cutting now, you saw our obligations are the percentage of or the majority of our budget. So your cuts now are to the kids. You're going to start. You're going to start being in the classrooms with the students. So that's just something to keep in mind as you tell us to go back and look.
So
that's where you're going to find
I
problems.
would encourage you to look at facilities maintenance. That's your third biggest cost.
We've done that to get us down to this.
So what, I don't want to get into a line item discussion there, because that's really not our business. And I'm pretty sure you don't want us to go there.
No, we appreciate that, but it is programmatic cuts that, we're talking about people.
So that's what
the
you're
dollars you want.
saying you want to
So that's what we have to go back and figure out.
So I'd ask you to
increased enrollment.
With
Yeah, it's
increased
increased
enrollment, we
enrollment.
have to cut something else.
Well, so we do, so a couple of things I think about, during the pandemic, we saw how you repurposed people. And
That's
you-
been done.
That's
Yes.
and we mentioned that in our
So I'm not,
presentation.
enough. We're not going to get in a back and
but
forth on
that's-
this. So we'll continue back with the Board of Finance discussion there. So these are hard things. This is not, my recommendation would be that we ask for 750 in cuts to evaluate, come back to us and let us know if you can't do that, why you can't meet the legal obligations, but we'd ask you to take another look, knowing what we're seeing both this year and next year. I'd ask you to take a hard look. I open it up to other discussions.
I have nothing more.
Does anyone disagree with that? Would like to
No, you've
change
seen the
them?
pain. You just heard the pain, and I mean, nothing is more stark than Michael's comment. I mean, which is pain, and there are other people going to be doing it. So, all right, here we are. And I back your comment. I don't see another way around it, but we are going to have pain on both sides this year.
So I put it to you as a challenge. It is not a mandate, but ask you to please go back and show us what that would look like. And then we can have a conversation about, I think the thing we think about is, okay, it's what do I get and what does it cost me? And we understand that what do I get is partly what do I need to do to fulfill the state obligation that is put upon you. And what does it cost me goes to some of the reaction we're going to get and the hardship it's going to be on real lives going forward. And our job is to look at both the what does it cost me, what do I need, what am I legally required to do, and what can the community afford. And when we strike that balance, I think it's reasonable to ask you to take another look and to see what you can identify to help the situation get better. And you can look at capital too. I mean, there are ways to do that. Jason, if you have something that's a one-time purchase in your facilities job, we can pull that out and pay for it in CNR. There are different ways to do that. Ask you to look at costs. Have some of those inflationary numbers come down? Can you think about some of those numbers? I don't know if you can get there, but my recommendation is that we do it as a challenge. And if folks are comfortable with that, I'd ask for a motion.
So moved.
Do we need to make a motion?
We don't need to.
Okay. I like it. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll second.
Okay. So the motion on the table is to request the Board of Finance to take another look and evaluate.
Board of Education.
Board of Education.
Yeah, we took the.
You can take another look.
Yeah. Well, we did.
All right, I did. Yeah, I haven't changed my
I'm
mind.
good with that. Derek lost my light on him. You take another look. We'll make it work.
You opened it up for them.
I did. I walked right into it. All right, so we have a motion, a second, to take another look. This is not a mandate, but it is a request to help us solve this problem to the extent you can, and come back with what you can. And we'll be making the same request to the Board of Selectmen. All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so that is sort of a charge to evaluate. Is there,
So then procedurally, we have to come back to you in 2 weeks or so.
so Amy, we could do it two ways. We could do, I think it would be ideal for you just to get back to us at some point. Preferably when the Board of Selectmen presents their budget, just your evaluation. See what,
Is that the 23rd? When is that?
21st?
I think it's the 21st.
If you can do that, that would help us sort of look, and, they're going to have to go back and come back to us. I'm not sure they're going to get, given the time frame, they may have to come back with their cuts that we'll make after the hearing. So there are two ways to do that. I think it's better to go into the hearing understanding what's possible. We can actually make the adjustments after the hearing because we want to hear from the public, because some of the cuts you're going to suggest will have an impact, and the public may have an interest in advocating for cuts. I don't know what the reaction is going to be, but we care very much what the public has to say. So,
Ultimately, they have the ultimate say.
and they
vote
do,
for it.
yes, they do have the ultimate say. So that's sort of where we are with that. We can, Amy, do you have a suggestion to do it differently in this regard?
I mean, whatever your preference is. I don't know how much time you want to review their stuff and give feedback, so.
Well,
I think I need more time on my end to figure it out and have conversations with people than you need on your end.
Well, I was just
To
curious,
evaluate it.
when
That's
would
fair.
we be expecting feedback from any potential changes we make or recommend to the Board of Selectmen? When would we?
So it would be
so
at the
then-
hearing, so we could do them both at the hearing.
I'd prefer not to have the
One in the right.
Board of Selectmen presenting their budget and you coming in and
So,
saying,
yeah.
look at how much money we saved.
No, that's fair. But, no. But, so I think at the end of the day, if you aren't able to cut your budget, we'll probably have to turn to the Board of Selectmen and say, we need you to cut more, or we need to look at capital. So it's a comprehensive look. It's not one or the other. And if you can't,
So you're thinking we would present cuts at the public hearing for everybody, basically everybody hears it at the same time?
I mean, we would prefer to have it a week in
I
advance
think
so we can
want
read it.
we want a number before that. We don't want to do that live.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We just need to figure out a timeline. I just need to go, that's all.
Okay,
Little distance, get a timeline, then we'll figure it out.
Okay.
okay.
All right?
And the other thing I'll just end with, I'm a former PTO president. I love the schools. I'm very devoted to them. I think you guys, Sue, I've come into her office and cried and laughed. I'm a big fan, and I don't know if you can do this. And I'm not saying you have to do this, because I understand that the impacts that it may have. But I am also a fan of Mike and people in Mike's situation. I'm also a fan. I just was with a friend of mine who's a senior living a pension. She said, Lisa, it's the first time I've had my pension is, I can't live on my pension. I'm having to dig deep into savings. She was worried. So it's the balance there. So it's a challenge. We understand it's a challenge. We've looked at the numbers. We understand there's not a lot of places to cut. We asked you to look because next year's going to be so much harder. So it's not something we take joy in, not something I'm happy about. I don't think there's anyone who's happy about it, and we're not doing it. I know you all and love you all, so I think you know we're not doing it to be mean. It's just our judgment looking at the total picture at this point. And again, not a mandate, but do what you can.
You're giving them an out.
I'm not.
You just made a motion with a recommendation for a
I'm a
number.
former PTO president.
Out a challenge and you're going.
Well, you don't have to.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, we want you to.
Yeah. We really do.
As we'll say.
I wasn't on the PTO,
Yeah.
but I strongly believe in paying for education, and I've expressed contempt for other towns that don't feel this way. But I also feel that we're heading for an iceberg, and it's very hard to turn the ship, and we need to start doing that now and getting as much of it as we can. Because the numbers are bad and they don't include all the expenses that we anticipate.
When I went through Latimer Lane, before we went through the exercise and ended up approving the renovate as new, there was no question in my mind that we needed to do something there. And I frankly, I'm afraid to walk through Squadron Line because I'm going to feel the same way there too. I know it was the right thing, and I think we'll get there with Squadron Line eventually. But even more of a reason to really sharpen this year, next year. That's it.
Yeah, it's not great, but it is what it is. All right.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Keep our board for just 1 second. The Board of Selectmen is going through their process as well. We have their books, but we obviously have not had the benefit of their presentation. We do know, however, that they're going to be needing to get their budgets down. I don't know if
Say that again.
the Board of Selectmen, we have not had the opportunity to hear their presentations yet. But looking at these numbers, we can anticipate we're going to make a request of them as well. And I didn't know if folks had initial thoughts on that yet.
I can't opine. I mean, we have better line of sight into specific line items in that budget, so I'd like to probably take a little bit deeper look.
Okay. Just in my head, just to put it out publicly, I'm sort of at the 2 to 2.5% increase, which would mean reducing their budget about 300 to 350.
That's down from 367 to 2.5,
I
roughly.
don't know, Amy, can you run that?
Yeah. What's the? Oh yeah, you have to go. Yeah.
Our proposed budget
There we
is
go.
463.
Yeah, I got to take out ARPA because not the 2.5 off the 30, just off the 26.
No. Because ARPA's in here too, so it should stay.
Oh, well, if you go back to the original sheet,
It's okay. I
it's
think
there.
that's.
Yeah.
I think you were at 300 here.
Yeah, it's about
That's
300.
what you.
Okay.
What was that? What did you do? 248
300.
gets you down to 300. I mean, ideally, I would like them at 2. That's a 750 increase in past years. So that would be a total reduction of $1 million between the two budgets, which does not entirely move the mill rate. Amy, if the Board of Education and the Board of Selectmen can find us $1 million, what does that do to the mill rate?
My formulas are messed up. Hold on a second. Why is it not changing? Oh, hold on. There we go. So it goes down, or goes to 31.72.
And what does that do to taxes? Not a lot of impact, I assume. Well, it does get it down about 75. Yeah.
Another 100.
What it's doing, I mean, yeah, it has an impact.
Has an impact. So, we're looking at those numbers. If the Board of Ed can't get the 750, maybe we go back to the Board of Selectmen between capital and that, and it becomes 3 to 5. I don't know if they can do that either.
So basically what you're saying is we should be at 1.1 million roughly across both boards.
1 million between both boards, yeah.
What did we say, 750?
Yeah.
And you said 300 for the.
Yes, I mean, maybe you're right, 1.1. I mean, look, as much as we can do, we should do.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a reasonable ballpark target, I think, given the squeezing of the stone here.
We're gonna have harder conversations next year, so I mean, frankly, I don't know how it could be any less than $1 million,
Amy, do you have suggestions of what we can do in this budget to either, obviously, we can, to either make this year better or next year better?
I mean, not off the top of my head, but I can go back and work through some stuff.
What are your assumptions for the next tranche, the debt service for the next tranche of Latimer? What interest rate?
I think we did, for the second tranche, I think it was 4%.
And the first tranche is,
3.5.
did we go out with that yet?
We did not.
Yes.
April or May. This year we will.
This year, so I don't know what municipal borrowing rates are for AAA rated, but I mean, has it gone up since we projected?
So it has gone up. The 3.5 and the 4 was recommended by our debt advisor. And even in the out years, it's actually even higher than that. I think it goes up to like 4.5% in that chart.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think it's important for the public to know that those numbers are fluid as well. I mean, the impact on I don't know what the tranches are in total dollars, but on millions of dollars, 50 basis points of impact from a debt service perspective is meaningful as well, especially over 10 years. So just something else to think about as we scratch our head with these projections.
Yeah, Amy, one of the things I know you had mentioned you were going to look into, we have on the revenue side, our interest income is only going up 20,000. You're going to explore whether there were opportunities to capture some interest increases are bad when you're borrowing, but they're really good when you've got lots of cash. Have we had made any progress there, where we think some of the revenues could go up?
That's a good point.
So, I mean, to me, that's a long-term goal, because right now we're just about to put, $30 million into Latimer, and I can't chance the cash flow by locking it up in a CD for a couple of years. So once we get through our cash flow needs for Latimer, I'm much more amenable to putting some money away, but right now I'm not comfortable doing that.
Okay. Are there any other revenues that could be adjusted that you look in
We
there?
can go back and take a look. I don't know if there's anything of significance, but we'll look.
Sorry, Amy, I don't want to keep everybody here, but what do we know what the total dollar amount is that we're waiting for state audits to basically release funds? What that total number is?
I don't have it off the top of my head, but I can send it to you all.
I think it's over $3 million,
Yeah.
isn't it?
It's-
It was just $2 million on.
Well,
on
just the one
Henry
line item,
James.
right? So, I mean, again, I don't know what, a consultant would tell us on possibly using some of those dollars, hedging our bet a little bit on whether we get that back or not. That's a lot of money that we don't know how long it's going to be tied up for, which is basically handcuffing the municipalities, which, especially in an inflationary year alone, really, I think, unfortunately, it is what it is. But I wouldn't be opposed if, there was a discussion and some realistic assumptions on what we could get back from the state after their audit.
Amy, can you evaluate, I know Maria has a plan for ARPA, but when we have that debt service, if we can't get some of the debt down, can we evaluate using reserves to get us through the hump as it goes up, to smooth that and get us back down to a reasonable debt level?
Sorry.
I forgot to do my PowerPoint.
Next time. As proposed, what is the reserve balance as a percentage of the total budget?
I think it's about 18%.
Okay.
Oh, you had 16.6. Can you go back to the first page? Has that changed?
What page?
The very first chart you showed at the beginning of the meeting, where it shows the whole budget. I think Maria had 16.8 in her budget book.
Oh, maybe. So not at the end of this year, at the end, or where we're gonna be at the end of fiscal year 24.
Okay.
Oh, she had 16 in her book, I thought. Do I have that wrong?
No, maybe. I think I was anticipating 18 for the end of this year, but I was taking that for the quarterly.
And you had already taken out the cash, her CNR cash, that 2.4 million she has in the CIP, you didn't just put that in there?
Right, I took out the capital. So yeah, should be about just shy of 17. And then if you,
So then we can take that million and use that for cash for capital to meet some of those unfunded needs there, or if we have a deficit in health. I mean, that's where that is gonna come in. We have no funding for these out years capital. But one of the things I was reading about Granby, they were they had raised a concern because their tax collection rate dropped.
Interesting.
Yeah, because I think people are starting to feel the effects of the economy, so they saw that, and they were,
Really?
I'm sorry, what drop?
their tax collection assumption.
Oh.
I mean, actual.
know what it
assumption-
was?
I don't. But they had that in one of their memos. So that's something we'll be watching. But I think you're right. Next year, do we look at the tax collection assumption rate? I would not recommend doing it this year, knowing what's coming next year. And if we do that, that you're cutting off a source of capital funding. So I don't know that that's the right thing, but over the summer when we do our policy review, it might be worth taking a look at that.
Well,
I'm depressed.
All right. Is that anything else at this point? Oh, Bert, you had a question on the attorney's letter.
I did have some questions on the attorney's letter. I'd like to follow up with the town attorney about them and then come back.
All right. Any objections to Bert reaching out directly to town attorney on that?
As long as we're not going to see a budget line item of like a 50% increase like we have in the BOE for legal expenses, then I'm fine with it.
go ahead, Bert, just give it a quick sketch.
Well, there are resources, or rather, there are legal authorities relating to the question of ESG investments that aren't cited in the letters, like, for example, the new Department of Labor regulation, which has been in the papers a lot. And I'm also I think the final recommendation is a little vague with respect to what kind of advice we're supposed to be seeking or what kind of information we're supposed to be seeking about specific investments. So I wanted to clear that up.
Okay.
I'm comfortable with it.
All right. With that, is there anything else, people? We do have the presentation on the 21st. Is there anything question. I knew there was something. Audit. Our auditor is available both on the 21st. We do have an extra meeting scheduled on the 23rd. I strongly recommend that we not do it on the night that Maria and the Board of Selectmen present, because those often are 3-hour meetings, and to do an audit on top of that. The 23rd is a Thursday? Are folks available for that?
I'll have to look. I'll check and let people know.
If there is an objection to that, we can do it all in one night, but
I'll have to
prepare
check
to be
as well.
there for.
Yeah. No. Wait, which night's going to be 3 hours?
Board of Selectmen is usually a 3-hour presentation. That's the 21st.
Okay.
Maybe it won't be. Maybe it'll be short and sweet. I don't know. Traditionally, because there are so many capital projects, it just takes a long time to go through all the capital projects.
Yeah.
That in and of itself takes a long time.
This will be easy. No. Just kidding. Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thanks, everyone.